going on, everybody? Welcome back to Let's Talk Movies. I'm Brad.
Now we go.
This is the third installment in our horror highlight series that we are doing, brand new series on the channel, where we're talking our top 3 moments from tons of just fantastic horror films. And we're in the middle. We're at the weird turning point
We are
that
at
is
the precipice
A Nightmare on
of
Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors. This is a very, the more and more I watch this, like over the last decade, my opinion on this movie has slowly morphed into many different things. I have a lot of mixed feelings about Dream Warriors. On one hand, I'm like, okay, there's some really, really cool stuff going on in it. And on the other hand, I'm like, what is happening? Like, it seems very strange. Freddy is still good in this movie, I think.
I think this is the start of
the
what's to come.
writing is good in the movie, but as you said, yeah, it's kind of I've always thought of this as the bridge between part 1 and part 2, and then part 4, 5, and 6. Like, it's just kind of, it's weird tonally. We make some strange decisions. So, but yeah, we're going to talk our top 3 moments from this film, as we did with part 1 and part 2. Those videos are out on the channel now. Go check them out. We were talking before we started filming. I'm intrigued to see if we have any of the same moments, because Dream Warriors gets a little bit more,
I don't know. There's a lot more
theatrical, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, it has a lot more memorable moments, I would say, in regards to
it does.
the franchise itself. So I'll be bold to say that we may have the same 3.
Yeah, I'd be shocked to see if we had the exact same. Part 2, we literally had the exact same 3 moments. Like,
we did, yeah.
Identical moments, which I love that film. I don't feel quite as strongly about Dream Warriors, but without further ado, here are our top 3 moments from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. With a Dream Anywho, so Dream Warriors, Miguel, hit me with your top. Well, not top, because we haven't really put them in. I guess we haven't really put them in an order, have we?
No, they haven't. But I usually go by like the point where the movie starts. Yeah. I guess. So like the first one that I was gonna bring up was the true moment of Kristen in her first nightmare, and her waking up in her bed, and then in the background is the Freddy house.
Bro, we already have the same front.
Oh, was that really?
Our first one's the same. Yeah. That is one of my absolute favorite dream sequences of the entire franchise. Like, the way...
It's definitely one of mine, yeah.
The way that it begins from... I mean, we see Kristen she's making Nancy's house out of the popsicle sticks and whatever, and her mom is just trying to get back downstairs to where's the bourbon guy, Yeah. Her mom is awful. She's up there with Nancy's mom from part 1. But yeah, the way that dream sequence begins when Kristen's sleeping, and it, like, she looks up and the house just kind of rises from behind the headboard, and like there's Nancy's house and it's all boarded up and there's lightning and the kids are doing the 1, 2, Freddy's coming. Yeah, it's such a cool sequence.
And it's interesting to see that, like, with Christian's dream beginning, I guess with when it comes to these dreams in particular, it's definitely have a different feel in regards to when they dream and when they're not. So they really like separated the point in time where like you're actually in real life, and then whenever you're actually in the dream world. And I think that's really neat of them to do, because I think it makes it not necessarily more campy, but it sets 2 different settings in the film that were so ambiguous in the last 2. Well, with the second one, it was primarily like possession and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily like dreams, dare I say, but as opposed to the first one, where like the dreams were kind of like ambiguous.
It's a clear contrast, yeah.
Yeah, there was a clear contrast in when they entered the dream land and when they weren't. So I thought this was pretty unique.
There's definitely, I think you're exactly right, and that there's a clear contrast. Like in the first film, that's part of the effectiveness of that first movie, is like, I mean, I think of moments like when Tina wakes up after, when she gets out of the bed with Rod and the rocks are being thrown at the window. Like you don't know whether she's dreaming or whether that's really happening with somebody throwing rocks. Like, like the first dream in the first film was kind of strange. The goat's running around, she's in the boiler room and things like that. Freddy's scraping the glove. Like Nancy's dream when she asks baby Johnny Depp to, she asks Glenn to watch her as she sleeps. That's a moment where when she wakes up, the house looks the same. Like everything looks the same in Dream World as it does in except for like, when we get to the drippy stairs and things like that. But like essentially everything looks the same. With this, there is a very clear contrast. Like every single time we see Nancy's house, it's disheveled and grungy and whatever, like, but yeah, it's a very clear contrast between Dream World and the actual house and what's happening, So I dig that, dude. The little girl is what makes this sequence for me.
Are you talking about where like Kristen was looking at the field of dead and she finally looks at who she's carrying and it's another dead person?
Yeah, because she like lures her in. Like Freddy's using the little girl to like lure her in. Like she comes up on the tricycle and she's like, oh, this is where he takes us, blah, 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 blah. And then, like, the boilers come on. She's walking in the disheveled house. And when the boilers all come on and the fire kind of engulfs everything, and the little girl just goes, Freddy's home. And then she grabs her and starts running. But what's cool about that sequence, it's one of my absolute favorite shots of Freddy in the entire franchise. And you can barely even see him. But at one point, Kristen grabs the girl. And as she's running down the hallway is stretching. It's got like the Haunted Mansion kind of thing, which is pretty dope. The hallway is like literally stretching as she's running. And you can see Freddy's shadow. He's kind of running and you see like this kind of thing in the background. You know what I mean? But
that was like that's the first introduction of Freddy.
Right. That's the first time we really see him. And you really only see his silhouette. But he runs around the corner and kind of freezes and smiles. And then he starts taking off towards her. At this point, she's running. She's trying to run and she can't anymore. Like she's just staying in the same place. It's like the gray, goopy mess, whatever. And Freddy is running up behind her and he goes to swipe. And as soon as he goes to swipe, she gets away. And there's something about that moment that I've absolutely I've always loved it. And then we get to the moment where she's like, put me down, you're hurting me. And she's decaying in her arms. Like it's a cool fake out.
Would be so distraught if I
that'd be horrible. That would be a terrible thing to dream. And then you have the whole thing on top of that, which I almost didn't include that in the moment, but it kind of is a part of the dream sequence still. When Kristen wakes up in her bed after that happens, and you're like, oh, okay, it's done. And she goes in the bathroom, and then she sees Freddy in the mirror, and the faucet, like, grabs her hand, and, and then she ends up slitting her wrist. Well, Freddy slits her wrist.
Well, Freddy did, and that's what caused Spiral.
Her mom walks in. It's funny because Kristen in that, not that anyone's slitting their wrist is funny, but in that moment, Kristen, like her mom opens the door, and Kristen, it's like Michael Myers in Halloween when Laurie stabs him with the knitting needle. He just goes. Bro doesn't like fall. He just like collapses. Like
right there. She just cut her wrist. Like that's a lot of blood coming out.
Freddy cuts her wrist. Her mom slams the door open, and Kristen just goes. She just falls straight down on the ground, and that's the end of the scene. But that whole opening dream sequence, it's so well done.
It's pretty baller.
So, like you can definitely tell. Like one of the first things I remember thinking when I saw this film for the first time years ago, I was like, yeah, their budget got a lot bigger. Their budget got significantly better for this film. So, what's your?
You can see where it went to afterwards.
Yeah, man. What's your second one? Your second favorite moment from this film?
So I think my second favorite one is the very first kill of the movie. I think that was the sleepwalking kill.
Oh my God, we have the same one again. The sleepwalking thing, which is fine. I mean, it's an incredible moment.
I promise we didn't share these notes.
We have not shared any notes. This is all unplanned. 100%.
My third one is the same, so at least we have that.
Yeah, Phillip's death is the sleepwalking death. Which is just it's gnarly. Like visually, it's very gnarly, but also the sound of it. Like if you
Yeah.
go back and watch it, it sounds like rubber bands or like rubber, like those the exercise stretchy band things. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
sounds like those. Like you're and it's there's something about that
It's so
scene that is just
gross,
like
and it's just
mm,
tendons is what.
yeah,
When it comes to body parts, for me, I know yours is bone, mine is
mm,
tendons. Like the
yeah,
fact that hearing someone slit their Achilles tendon or something of that nature snapping,
yeah, that's bad.
like that's probably the worst feeling for me. So to
Yeah,
see that in action and Freddy pretty much use him as a
yeah,
puppeteer, which was I guess foreshadowed due to his antics, it just made it so much more icky to see like it
yeah.
coming out of his foot and
Oh,
through his hands,
mm,
and
mm,
it's just frightening to see that coming out of
yeah.
that poor young boy.
Well,
But
it's
it
funny
also
because
so you go ahead.
you're good. When that scene starts, I think it's hysterical because we get claymation Freddy, which we
I was gonna put that
it's
on my
so
list.
funny. You know
Claymation
what I mean?
Freddy was pretty cool. I like
That
Claymation Freddy more than TV Freddy. I'll be honest.
oh yeah, and
For as
it
short as it
works.
was, yeah.
Like the claymation thing works and it looks kind of cool, and then unfortunately it's ruined by the god awful shot of CGI Freddy like rising out of him, but it looks so terrible. And
Yeah.
that's when, as you said, we get the tendon slit where we see Freddy like slashing at him, and Phillip can't move at this point, but like we see it kills me because we actually like see his skin ripping and the
Mhm.
tendon like rising
Yeah.
up out of it, and
It's about as
it's
bad as
gross.
Buff Girl, and I think Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
when she
The
turned when
cockroach thing. Yeah,
did she become a cockroach? No, I was thinking of
yeah.
the
I
Muscle
was
Girl, the one
that's
who is
yeah.
that the one where she was lifting weights
Yeah, yeah, where she's
and
lifting
she still
weights and
became a
he
cockroach after
breaks
doing
her
that?
yeah, he breaks her
Oh
arms.
fuck!
Well,
I
not
didn't
only
even realize it kept
he
going after
breaks her
that.
arms, then she becomes a cockroach and then she gets stuck on a glue trap and he squishes it.
Ugh.
Icky.
Okay, well
It's a bad
we know
one.
what our favorite moment in that movie
Yeah,
is now.
I that's there's a little bit of a foreshadowing we want
Yeah.
to the next installment of this series, um but yeah, man, like when the camera pans down in that moment and we see that Freddy is using his tendons as like the rubber bands to puppeteer him out of the bed, like, and
Hmm.
honestly, the special effects are surprisingly good for that. Like you can hear the pulling sounds, like in the stretchy sounds, like we said, but like,
You can definitely tell that they went hard on the budget, like the very first part of the
yeah,
film.
which, if you, we talked about this in our Purely and Simply Evil episode, which we did with Mike and Jay from We Watched a Movie. It's one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. So you can go back and watch that. I'll link it here. But um, the problem with this film is that they spent so much money on all the effect shots that like by the end of production they had no money for anything else, which
Hmm.
you can kind of see that like
Yeah,
towards it, like the bone
which
thing,
I
the
was kind
bone
of.
suit, like when John Saxon goes back and they try to like him and Neil are like resurrecting or like they're trying to kill Freddy's skeleton. That is
Yeah,
the worst looking garbage I've ever seen in my
I was
life.
gonna put that on
It's
my list
terrible.
too, but I didn't want to like. I really didn't want to put it in the
Yeah,
list, but it was definitely an
that's
honorable
not
mention for
one of my
that.
favorites.
But is that one
Yeah.
of those things I like? Films don't record in the same process as we watch the film. Does that make sense? Like they
Oh
do it
yeah,
in
they don't.
different parts.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is like I know that they started on the beginning of the film
Right.
with the budget because it was clearly done really well. But
Hmm.
then some part in the third act, it just felt like they ran out of money and
It
they tried
yeah,
to do
like
something.
this movie. It's not even just the effect shots. It's like overall this movie really runs out of steam for me, like
Hmm.
somewhere in that third act, and it's like
Yeah.
it gets too fantastical. It gets to be like too many different characters and too much going on. Like it feels like I've kind of find myself at some point like, okay, let's we got to pick up the pace here. Like there's what John Saxton and Neil are doing, there's the nun thing, there's what Nancy
The
and
nun thing was
Kristen and
just
all of them are doing.
yeah.
There's like there's so many. It's like they were trying to do like an Avengers Infinity War type thing of like all these different people in all these different places doing all of these
Mhm.
different things. Um And not to mention the fact, this kind of even ties in, like at one point in this film when Freddy is puppeteering Phillip with his tendons out, like Phillip walks through the wall because apparently Freddy can manipulate things in the outside world now. And like, it's
Oh
things
yeah,
like
that was
that
a
where
rule
it's
break
like,
that like really didn't make sense, did it?
yeah, this is another thing about Dream Warriors is this is a film where like the rules really started to be like, okay, this is not. I mean, part two was kind of like that. I've always felt like
Hmm.
part two you could look at as like a standalone thing because it's so vastly different from
Yeah.
what happened in part one and what
Well,
happened in
Freddy
part
didn't seem like a
three.
nightmare killer with
Yeah, with part
with
two, it was like a
part two.
possession kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. But it feels like this movie, as Dream Warriors especially, I feel like we changed the rules 10 times in this movie, you
Hmm.
know? And it's very, very strange. It's one of the
Or we
things that
just
I
wrote
feel
rules
like,
as we went, pretty much.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I don't know. But all of that to say, I do like Freddy in this movie. Like, I think he is still, I think he has the more of the essence of part one Freddy, but more of the sinisterness of part two. Like, we were just
Hmm.
talking about Philip's death a minute ago. Um, he like he puppeteers Philip out to the balcony, and he knows that they're all, like we see them break the window and they're all screaming at him to wake up and whatever, and we see Freddy like laughing at him about to, cut the strings, and like that's sinister. Like we still get
It goes to
sinister
show how
Freddy.
like omnipotent he
Omnipotent.
is. Yeah, omnipotent he
Words are
is.
hard.
Yeah, in this film, like
Yeah.
he seems so much more powerful in this film
Yes.
than any other
Yeah.
that I've
Yeah.
seen.
The worm.
The
Him
worm,
becoming
yeah,
the
okay,
worm in the
yeah.
dream, like he didn't do anything like that in in part one or part two. Like we had the dog thing, but they were also a separate entity from Freddy. We never saw Freddy actually
Yeah.
transform into another creature that
Hmm.
I can think of, at least in part one or part two. So like,
Not that I know of.
it's just it did some strange things, and that's why I there are parts about this film that I really really like, but there are also things about this film that I'm just what were you all doing? Like what were you
Hmm.
thinking? So what was your third favorite moment from the
Well,
film?
we
Hopefully
did
we
it
all have
already.
the same one. Oh, did we?
Oh my god, yeah. I swear to God, if you mentioned it, it was Worm Freddy.
Nope, that was not mine.
Okay, there you go. Yeah,
Sweet.
Worm Freddy is probably my favorite, and it
It's pretty
was
dope.
the first interaction of Christian showing the powers to Nancy and what she
Yeah.
can do, which I
Yeah.
thought was pretty cool. But so Worm Freddy and then the reintroduction of Nancy and Freddy was probably
Hmm.
one of my favorite moments in
Yeah,
the in the middle of the film, or even
I
I
would
guess
agree.
at the beginning. So for and the reason why I enjoyed Worm Freddy is because this one made it feel like Freddy had so much power, or he was more
Hmm.
imaginative with
Yeah.
his powers in Dream Warriors, and I think that made I think that made like the kids have to do some more imagination themselves
Right.
because you had stop motion Freddy,
Hmm.
you had puppeteer Freddy, you had MTV like literal TV Freddy, and then you also had Worm Freddy, and then you
It
also had
seems like
Skeleton Freddy.
it seems like he's able to do so much more.
Yeah, no,
And maybe
and
he was able to do those things in part one and part two, but it just seems, I don't know. Like
they turned it
part
up a
one, he
notch
still
in regards
seemed
to his
like,
powers.
yes,
He
like
just
in
seemed like
part
a
one and
killer
part two,
in your
he just seemed
dreams.
like, yeah, it seemed like a serial killer that was trying to get you. Like he was just running around chasing you with the glove. And this thing, he's like transforming and manipulating things in the real world as you're dreaming. Like it's interesting. It's an interesting turn of
Hmm.
events here. But yeah,
Yeah.
that
So
moment you were talking about with him and Nancy, you,
Oh my god.
I
yeah.
love that.
Well, no, mine was whenever Worm Freddy popped out of the floor and caught
Mm,
Christian, and I was like,
yep,
oh fuck! Like I didn't know that was Freddy at the time
yep,
until we saw his face, and I was like, oh shit, that's not just a worm. That's actually Freddy like
yeah.
turning into a worm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was a really unique scene, and I'm sure the prosthetics and the special effects were absolutely top notch. Like that had to be like the first thing they did
That
in the
animatronic
filming.
ate up like an eighth of the budget.
Yeah, I 100%.
Guaranteed.
It's like Bruce. I'm sure
Yeah.
like that Worm Freddy was 100% Bruce in Jaws.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great moment. And honestly, I didn't even consider that. My other favorite moment from this film, and I chose this one. There were a few that I was kind of going back and forth with, but I chose this moment because I think it really showcases the sinister nature of Freddy. And it reminded me. I went back and watched part 3 before we filmed this, as I'm doing with all of them. And going back and watching this, it reminded me of something that part 2 Freddy would do. We talked about this in our last video, but part 2 Freddy felt very personal and violating in a lot of different ways. And I think this Freddy, in part 3, he uses, the TV, and he uses, like the things that like are personal to the characters in this film to get to them. And my third favorite moment of this film is actually Taryn's death, the "Let's Get High" sequence, because they realize that they have their dream powers and things like that, and they have their little Avengers Assemble moment. What can you do in your dream? That they have that whole
all
thing.
Their dream powers fucking sucked. The only thing I thought was the funniest, and I had this as my top, but I decided not to, was Kristen's powers when she actually used it. When she got ambushed by Freddy, and she was just somersaulting all throughout that fucking room like a bouncy ball, to the point where she just went right out the window.
Kristen could fight him versus the rest of them, who are just like, I can do this.
Kristen straight up went Texas Chainsaw and jumped out of that window like it was her job.
Yeah.
I was cracking up that one.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I don't like. It's like the dream, like if you're gonna give them like superpowers, like make it cool. You know what I mean? Because like Kincaid is like, I can pick up this chair. Like, cool. Like, how is that gonna help us?
Kincaid was probably the one that I thought had like power. Like, I mean, he was super strong.
Yes, yeah.
But like, and who was it? The mute had like,
we also can't forget
Sonic. He was like Black Adam.
Yeah.
Like that.
We also can't forget, I am the Wizard Master.
His death was so like despicable, dude.
Yeah, man.
Well, I thought it was cool that like Freddy actually used his blades to like really like we saw him use his blades like a lot in this film. Yes, I thought that was really neat.
I do appreciate that. But yeah, Taryn's death, it felt sinister. It felt personal. She's an addict. She's had addiction problems. We know this about her character. And then, she has her "I'm beautiful and bad" moment. She's got her switchblades. This feels very personal in a way that some of the other deaths don't. Exactly. He's using her addiction and her problems against her. Like, she's in her dream, she's in the alley, and the wall behind her has the spray painted yellow Taryn and Freddy. And the homeless man stands up, and we're like, oh crap, that's Freddy. He's gonna be her. And it's really just a homeless dude, like, walking away. It's just a random homeless guy that gets up and leaves. And then she turns around and Freddy's standing there, and he's like, welcome home, look familiar, that kind of thing. And they have that super 80s, it's kind of cheesy, because she's like, let's dance. And she flips out her switchblades, and he just goes,
those weren't even like switchblades.
I'm like, bro, what are you doing right now? And like, her and Freddy have their little like West Side Story fight there for a minute, you know what I mean?
West Side Story.
And Freddy's like, wait. Why should we fight? You're old friends, you and I. And when he raises his, I'll never forget seeing this for all needles. I was like, damn. I was like, man, that's really rough to like. It's a very dark thing. It's a very low blow. And as soon as she sees it, like, she's just like mortified.
Overcome,
and they're all heroin needles. And when he looks at her and he says, let's get high, and he starts walking to her, and the worst part, what the worst part about this scene is? She looks down at her arms, and all of the needle scars on her arms are going,
oh yeah,
they're little mouths that are like opening and closing and like waiting on them. And Freddy walks up and just like slams the needles into her arm. And as she's dying and her arm's like puckering, waiting for the needles, which is just gross. I love that Freddy, like, he's such a dick in that moment, because he sticks the needles in her, and like he's he's killing her, and meanwhile he's going, oh, like his eyes are rolling back, and then he goes, what a rush.
God, yeah, that was pretty bad.
He's such an asshole in that moment.
It really tackled. It really like alluded to his like really sus motives.
Yeah, too. Yeah. Again, very, very violating way to go out, but it's one of the better Freddy moments I think in this film. So
no, I agree too.
Yeah, Dream Warriors, man, yeah. It's an interesting movie. Again, we really went deep with this one with Mike and Jay, and I'll link that at the end of the video. But let us know your 3 favorite moments from Dream Warriors. The first 3 are good, and I genuinely enjoy watching them.
Yes.
Part 4, I went back and watched part 4, and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I actually skimmed through part of it. I used to think part 6 was my least favorite, Freddy's Dead. I don't know, man. Part 4 is like, I mean, the difference. Like, we go from 1 and 2, and I'm like, okay, cool. Part 3 is like, oh, okay, I don't know what's going on. Part 4 is like, and we're down here now. Like, so I don't know. But we're gonna have a whole conversation next about,
we're gonna have a conversation about all of them.
Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. So let us know in the comments below your 3 favorite moments from Dream Warriors. And we're talking Elm Street, the entire franchise. We're talking Halloween. We're going to talk quite a few different horror films all throughout our Oktoberfest event. We're sticking with this horror highlight series where we're going to talk our top 3 moments from plenty of different horror films all throughout the month of October. We've got at least 2 or 3 videos dropping for over the next month every week. So it's pretty cool. We're really looking forward to it. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at LTM Podcast KY. Please join the Facebook group. You can just type that jargon in at the bottom of your screen, and it'll take you there. Take you there. We can't use the song or we'll get copyright. I don't know what I'm saying. Guys, have an awesome rest of your spooky season, beginning week, whatever time this is.
Whichever one's starting.
Yeah. Have your dream and go figure out what your dream power is. I hope it's something cooler than the Wizard Master or screaming and breaking windows. So
I am the somersaulting Wizard Master.
Yeah, I can cover up with a blanket. I can skip a stone in the lake.
Wow. And you really went hard on those jokes.
I did. It was pretty terrible. All right, guys. We will talk to you soon. Have a good rest of your night. See you.